Hey everyone, this is a recap of my thought process and logic behind today's trade from Monday, July 7th, 2025. And if you want to see the live execution itself, you can check it out in my playlist called Executions. So it's Monday today, and first thing this morning, I checked the economic calendar. There was nothing significant scheduled for today, but I know we have got the FOMC coming up on Wednesday. Because of that, I was anticipating that price might be a bit choppy and less directional, since the market often goes into a holding pattern consolidation ahead of the first major news of the week. Mondays can also be tricky in general, unless it's an NFP week. So I came into the session prepared for potentially unfavorable conditions and kept my expectations realistic. For my framework today, or the context, I started by making out the higher time frame levels that I always look at. I noted the new week opening gap, last week's high and last week's low, and the previous day's lows as a possible draw on liquidity. I also checked for any relative equal highs or lows that might attract price. During the session itself, I'm always watching how price interacts with session liquidity. I want to see if there has been any raid, either above buy-side liquidity or below sell-side liquidity, because that's one of my key confirmations to figure out if the market is targeting external liquidity or setting up to reverse. My plan was to stay on the sidelines until my time window of execution, which for me starts after the 9:30 New York equities open. That's where I typically get the most reliable volatility and volume for my setups. Once that window opens, I'm specifically watching for the first presented fair value gap, that initial displacement move from it. That usually gives me a clue which side of the market price wants to pursue / attack or take liquidity from. If that first presented fair value gap lines up with my model, I will look for an entry targeting either sell side as my low-hanging fruit, and if the conditions aren't clean, I'm perfectly fine standing aside because protecting my capital is always the priority. So let's break down the trade I actually took today. During the morning session, I was just observing the price action, but honestly, I didn't see anything that fit my model or met my criteria for a high-quality setup. And that's perfectly fine. That's part of trading. Sometimes the best trade is no trade. So I stayed flat and I practiced patience and waited for the PM session instead. Going into the afternoon, I started by marking out the New York EM session high and low, plus the lunch macro high and low. Those are key levels for me because they often act as magnets or reversal points later in the day. After that, I was waiting for the first presented fair value gap to print after the 1:30 p.m. open range. That's typically where you will see fresh displacement if there is going to be a move. Once that first presented fair value gap showed up, I decided to execute short because the price action lined up perfectly with my model. I also had additional confirmation because price kept respecting an internal fair value gap, or as you see here, inverted fair value gap that formed earlier in the move. I used that inverted fair value gap as my invalidation level, placing my stop loss just beyond it to define my risk on the trade. There was a small drawdown after my entry, but that's just part of the game. You have got to give the trade some room to breathe, especially on a Monday when conditions can be more erratic. I stayed patient, trusted the plan, and eventually price moved in my favor. It ran all the way down to my target, which was the lunch macro low, and that's where I closed the trade. Overall, it was clean execution and a good example of waiting for my setup instead of forcing something during the morning session. So that's my New York session recap for today. I hope this helps you see how I apply my model and think through the session. If you are interested, check out the live execution in the executions playlist, and I will see you in the next one.